Ladies and gentlemen, boys and ghouls, to all of our non-binary friends, to everyone on the spectrum and in between, welcome to another episode of The Shutter Show. My name is Ken Stacknick, and this is my co-host,
David Marlowe.
And David, how you doing today?
Ken, I am fine and dandy, like Sarah Kennedy, as you would say. It's been a bit of a crazy day. I've been running all over the place. Like I said, I've been trying to get back into the acting thing a little bit. So did a whole bunch of self-submissions, got super depressed by a bunch of posts that, want you to do all this work for literally no money. And that wheel continues to spin. And also at the same time, still interviewing for carpentry jobs.
Well, there we go.
So yeah, it's been a crazy day.
Good to hear. I'm still settling in here in Colorado and making sure all the pups are getting along and just getting things all set up. Just getting used to things again, I guess.
Yeah. Ken, what's your beverage of choice today?
I have a lovely Blue Moon, a nice little Belgian blonde. Or Belgian white, I'm sorry.
Oh, that sounds so nice right now.
What are you doing?
Just because of this meal plan, I've got to avoid beer. So, do my own little whiskey sour. So, I still get some nice stuff.
Okay, all right, good.
But we did this meal plan, and we bought a bunch of chicken to make for like 2 of the meals on it. And we open it today, and it is the most rotten thing that I've ever smelled.
Oh, wow.
And so we're like, well, I guess we're going to have to improvise on this one. Or, I could just get horribly, horribly ill and just. But yeah, it's been interesting.
I mean, that is one way to lose weight, David, is to just give yourself E. coli.
Yeah. It is also like 95 degrees today here in California, and it's going to be in over 100 tomorrow.
So you're going to sun roast that chicken.
Oh yeah, sun roast that chicken. But then also just sit out and I'm gonna, I hear it's healthy to literally sweat the weight off. So
worked in the 70s.
Yeah, worked in the 70s. Why not? It's what a bunch of wrestlers apparently do to get to the right weight.
You are not wrong. David, question. What movie are we talking about this week?
Oh, Ken. We took a poll, and it was between The Wicker Man and both of them the OG Wicker Man and the OG Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And overwhelmingly, Texas Chainsaw Massacre won out. Not that Wicker Man is a bad film. I just think more people want to see people killed by chainsaws than they do a Burning Man reenactment. So, yeah, we're going Texas Chainsaw, baby.
Oh, man. And to the fans out there who've never experienced Texas Chainsaw Massacre, we are talking about one of the all-time bangers. Like, we are talking about one of the OG classics. We are talking about what I would argue is one of probably 2 pillars of modern horror, of the yin and yang that come together. Like, we are, oh man, like rewatching Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I was just reminded again and again just how awesome and how much of this movie just rules still to this day, how effective it is, how I think it's really interesting the way that Texas Chainsaw Massacre has kind of aged, and has aged beautifully in a way that Halloween has not. Halloween was definitely like a bigger hit back in the day. It was definitely more of an impact when it came out. But if you want to talk about lasting legacy, man, for me, I see Texas Chainsaw Massacre's fingerprints on everything. And I'm so excited to talk about it.
Hands down. And Ken, this is such I love this franchise, but the strange part is that, strangely enough, the original Texas Chainsaw, I really had never seen in its entirety in one sitting. I'd seen chunks of it. And for some reason, I either got interrupted by something or the quality because right now, we have the Shutter has the best cut of it. It had everything's remastered. The picture is amazing. As you said to me earlier, this is about as good as it's ever going to look.
Yeah, like the only thing you could do with this is manipulate it beyond what, like, and make it something it wasn't originally. But it's this is as good as this movie looks. Period.
Whereas every time I think, like, I tried watching it on VHS at one point when I was younger, and the quality was just terrible, or the tape was bad, or something like that.
So Texas Chainsaw kind of falls under that Last House on the Left of it. Also, kind of gets scarier the more like the as the quality dips, the reality level goes up, and as a result, the effectiveness, in my opinion, also increases. I would say that, like, seeing this beautiful 4K like revived version is interesting. I kind of prefer it on DVD or VHS because it feels so much more visceral, but I'm so glad, for reference if nothing else, we can see it in its entirety, in its originality. It's what I'm upset about when I can't get the original Star Wars in its original cut. I want to see the matte lines. I want to see the film grain. I want to see what 1977 Star Wars looked like. And I get a chance here to see what this movie looked like in 1974 off of an A print, struck from the negative and shown like on its best night. This is as close as you are going to get to understanding what it was like to see Texas Chainsaw Massacre at its premiere.
Yeah.
Like,
it slaps so hard.
It slaps so hard. And on top of it,
but the audio is also better.
I mean, the photography is actually really good. There is a like, unlike Last House on the Left, the photography in this, the like sort of cinema verite documentary style, is beautiful in the traditional kind of European documentary way, in which that it uses natural light, it uses snap zooms, it uses every single trick in the book in order to tell you the story that's happening in front of you. Where something like Last House it's much closer to something like much closer to something like Blair Witch Project, where like the whole point is it looks like they drug this film out of the desert somewhere in a can that was kind of half developed.
Well, and that was sort of the appeal of it. And that's like both Texas Chainsaw and the Blair Witch have the same marketing campaign, pretty much, in the sense that like they got people to the theaters by lying to them and saying that this was based off a true story, where the most that this is based off of is that this film is like loosely based off of two serial killers, one primarily being Ed Gein, who, as we know, like, you know, wore, like, he only killed like two people, I think, but then like robbed graves and wore people's skin. And it was, like that was loosely based off of that. And that's kind of like, well, we didn't really lie to you, but this didn't actually
tell you the truth.
Yeah. He also didn't tell you the truth. But that's why people eventually went, like, that's why people were going to see a matinee of this film when it first came out.
Well, like, this was like, so sorry, everyone, I'm almost 40. That makes me very old. And this movie had a reputation, like, this was the movie your older brother showed you, or your older brother told you about when you were like 8, and then you waited with bated breath till 14 when you finally got a chance to see it. It was like, bro, no, man. Like,
where's my first memories of Texas Chainsaw, strangely enough, because, and we'll talk more about the sequels as we kind of get maybe halfway through this episode, because I want to take a large chunk of this and really dive into the actual film itself.
Yes.
OG film. But I was first introduced to Texas Chainsaw just because at the video, every time I went to the video store, I always went into the horror section because they had the best cover art.
Always.
And there was always all of the Texas Chainsaw movies. And I'm just like, not being a kid and not knowing really where to start, I just kind of like, well, which one had the grooviest looking cover? And then sure enough, Next Generation, in my opinion, had more color to it. It kind of just grabbed my attention more.
Had movie stars on it.
Yeah, had movie stars. I mean, Matthew McConaughey and Renee Zellweger before they got real big. I think Matthew McConaughey was just out of acting school at this point when he took this role. And the same with
maybe
Renee Zellweger.
Dazed and Confused is out. Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. But that was the first film I saw, and I do, because it is a comedy. That sequel is by far a comedy. And I remember my stepmother was very concerned because there is a point where Leatherface is taking by far what has to be the dumbest woman ever written for the screen, and is struggling with a 90, like this giant man is struggling with a 90-pound woman who is screaming her head off, just trying to get her into the house, and then puts her into the freezer, but doesn't think to like keep it shut. And she just keeps popping out, screaming. And he just keeps like, he seems genuinely frustrated that she's just not staying put. And then finally he takes this giant generator and just goes, fuck you. And I laughed at that all while the screaming of this woman is going on. And my stepmother heard that from like the other room and was very concerned about how I was maturing as a child. And it's just like, why does he find this thing that he's watching / listening to so funny? Do we need to take him to a therapist? But I just recognized this for what it was. I'm like, this is absolutely ridiculous. And I'm here for like every second of it.
I mean,
the
black comedy element is rife through, for sure, all of the originals and its sequels. You can get into the Marcus Nispel movies and their sequels, and how much of that comedy element is retained. I would argue that there's a small amount of black comedy that the remakes kind of keep up, but the original ones are full on kind of funny in some spots. Like the thing that I always think about is the scene in the original 1974 Texas Chainsaw Massacre where they're trying to get Grandpa to kill Marilyn Burns, and like he just can't keep the hammer up, and like they just keep dropping it and being like, come on, Grandpa, you can do it. And he just kind of like keeps glancing, like, and every time he just glances across her skull with the hammer, you're like, oh, come on, just please, just this is kind of funny, but also please just kill this lady or let her go. And then you definitely see Toby Hooper in 2 kind of take the comedy to an entirely different level. And
2 is so different.
Oh, it's wildly different. And people will argue whether or not it's successful. But it is a great example of a director deciding there are elements. So, all right, here's what I think of. In Die Hard, there was an interview with Bruce Willis, and they asked Bruce Willis why Die Hard was so popular. And he goes, I think really people like seeing a guy from Jersey cracking wise. And okay,
because
Bruce.
He's Bruce Willis, and he has the ego the size of a grapefruit.
I mean, yes, but I would also be like, that's not what my favorite part of Die Hard is. And if that's what you think is important, Bruce, you can think that. I don't think you're right that that's why people like to watch Die Hard every Christmas. I'm feeling it maybe
what you got out of it.
But you believe whatever you want to believe, Bruce. You enjoy your Seagram's commercials. You enjoy your the Return of the Bruno. You've made excellent choices your entire life. Now, David, I think it's important that we walk the people through your Texas Chainsaw journey, because it is wild. You have already mentioned that you had not seen the OG version in its completion, but
I watched it. It had been ages since I even watched parts of it, and
there was
so much that I was unfamiliar with.
Yeah, you got this franchise by the back legs and let it run around and drag you all over the place. So
yeah,
you catch the viewers up on in what order you did this.
Well, my relationship with this is almost similar to the way that my relationship is with Doctor Who.
Okay.
Where I don't know if you remember that Ben Moy, who did who we've mentioned on this podcast a couple of times, is doing the score for the opening title for our podcast. Which check out his podcast Hooked on Score whenever you get a chance. But he decided to show me Doctor Who instead of, from the beginning like one should. He decided to show me starting with Matt Smith. And he literally just started me on the Matt Smith season, completely out of context of everything. And I could not have been more confused and disinterested.
Yeah.
However, the difference with this one was I was very interested in this because nothing in any of these sequels matches up. It's all its own thing, trying to be some variation of the first one. They're either trying to remake it, retcon it, or continue it.
Yeah.
And they never seem to get it completely right. So the studios keep constantly wanting to come back and trying again. And so
But where did Leatherface get the Leatherface from? Ooh, but what brand of chainsaw?
From someone's face.
Yeah, you're like, no, these are not any of the like. That's like saying,
why are we overthinking this?
Yeah, you know. Do you know what brand Freddy Krueger's sweater is? No, and I don't. Shut up. Like, I don't care where Han Solo got his dice from. Get a job. Like,
what Robert Englund's like walking through the mall and he sees that sweater and somehow he has a connection with it. And you're like, I don't care about where the things I love come from.
Mm-hmm.
What was it? Patton Oswalt. Like, hey, do you like Angelina Jolie? She make it real hard. It's like, well, here's John Voight's scrotum ballsack.
Yep, you're not wrong.
But I've seen, and I took a deep dive with this. Like once this one, and I knew this was going to be the one we were covering. Ken, I dove deep. Like I watched this one first. I watched the OG, and then I watched. I'd seen 2 recently, so I didn't feel the need to rewatch that one. But then I watched Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw 3. I watched Next Generation, and then I've seen the Michael Bay produced remake so many times because I do love that film. Whatever unpopular opinion that might be to some folks, I still think it's really good. And I would argue
it's probably the best of the Platinum Dunes remakes.
Yeah.
Like it is. Yeah.
Now here's the thing. I also like the last one I watched, and before we started settling in and getting ready to record today, was the 2013 Texas Chainsaw. The one that was shot in 3D.
Yes, the one without the.
Yeah, exactly. Surprisingly, I had fun with it. Towards the end, it goes a little off rails, and some things that get a little rushed. But leading up till then, I had a fun time.
I would argue that of all of the none of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies are perfect. I would say the first one is the closest thing to a borderline masterpiece. There are flourishes and moments in the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre that I would put up there with the best of any horror directors out there. That said, like just in the opening minutes, like I think the opening shots of the corpse are masterful. That slow zoom out, the weird position it's in, the way that, the radio that's talking. And then we cut to like the side of the road. And I would argue that scene is way over covered. Too many shots, too many snap zooms, there's just like too much kind of going on. And then we cut back to what's going on in the cemetery. And we have that incredible shot where you have the drunkard upside down, like laughing and kind of talking about what's happening.
Yeah.
And that's incredible.
Well, it introduces you to the world that the crazies live in. And so when you finally come across them, they don't seem nearly so out of place as they might in the other sequels. Like in Next Generation, they go from a high school prom to, we're in the fucking Hicks where there's a bunch of chainsaw wielding murderers and a guy with a mechanical leg. Comes out of fucking nowhere. Whereas this one, like, not only is it really good at making things terrifying in the daylight, which is a very rare quality that you see in horror film. It's the idea that you're never safe no matter what time of day it is. You see a lot of horror movies. There's a great analysis I watched where it's like you see most horror movies use daylight as a way to tell the audience member that they are safe. And sometimes they'll play with that, but when most of the film takes place during the daytime, you have no idea what the fuck's going to happen. And Toby Hooper does a really good job of playing that up. And it's just like the boy, like the first, one of the first characters gets killed right off the bat, just stumbling into a room, and out of nowhere, he's dead. One of the other guys wanders in, finds the woman in the fridge, and has a brutal hammering to the head out of nowhere. It just seems like, oh no, this is all causality.
And also let's point out, like, I know it feels like Kirk's death, the first death, happens right away, but it happens 35 minutes into the movie.
No, he's been in there for a while.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, it's a much slower burn movie than people give it credit for. People act like Texas Chainsaw kind of happens right out of the gate, and no, it's a little weird at first, and like everything that happens with the hitchhiker, and I mean, like, all of that buildup definitely creates a lot of tension. But like that first death doesn't happen for 35 minutes into a movie that is an hour and 25 minutes long.
Yeah,
So that's like a third of the movie is over before anyone dies. And then let's be clear, lots of people die pretty quick after that. Like, once that first death happens, it's a real, like,
yeah,
lots of people dying. But it doesn't happen, like, it was one of those things that I remembered the same way. I remembered it being faster out of the gate, and then I found myself being like, oh wow, no, actually, well, because I mean, it's not Alien, which is a total slow burn, but it's a much slower burn than people give it credit for.
yeah. And I think also too, like when I first saw this when I was younger, when you're a kid, you kind of want to, well, get to the scary stuff, get to the action, let's start things going. Like, you don't, at least me as a kid, especially a kid with just terrible, terrible ADD, the more dialogue there was, the more I'm just like, pause. What else is there to do? But now as an adult, like watching this and having the full audio and video quality that Shudder allows it to have, there's a lot of things that I caught in context of why they were there and who was who to which people. And it did, like, I felt more connected with these characters, getting to finally watch from beginning to end and leaving having a far better appreciation for it than I did before. And then going into the other films, into the sequels, and reading about all the weird shit into how these got made and what went wrong and what they were trying to do is fascinating. And how there's like either a co-writer or a co-director or like some person who worked on the crew has always in some way, shape, or form been involved with one of the sequels. It all at least has its roots back to the original. And it's miraculous. Like it's such a, I will say, like, when people look into the making of this film, I do think it gets a bit of a rap for sort of the routes that Toby Hooper went to make it for the budget that he did, which was, I think, like 300, I think eventually 300. They were saying that it got made somewhere around like somewhere between 96,000 to 300,000.
It depends on which and editing. It depends on what you're looking at, whether you're looking at adjusted for inflation or not. But what is that happened is it made like $150 million on a budget of less than $500,000.
So yeah, one of the highest grossing films of, like, God, what was it, like 1974?
Yeah, 74 is the original one.
Yeah, it was like one of the highest grossing films of that year. This horror film that some countries would not allow to air because it was too brutal, despite the fact that there's little to no blood or cursing or nudity.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a lot like Halloween in the fact that, like, what is implied is way more brutal than what you actually see. But I mean, some of the only blood in this movie is at the very, 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 very end, when Leatherface drops the chainsaw on his own leg. Yeah. And you see
one of the few people that actually get hurt by a chainsaw.
Yeah.
Outside of
being seen explicitly.
Yeah.
And then you're like, well, does it count as hurting a person to cut them up when they're dead? Well, no. It doesn't hurt them at the time, but seems bad, seems problematic, would personally not like that happen to me. David, quick question, a little piece of trivia for you. Do you know who does the voiceover at the very beginning of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre?
Oh, yes, I do. I didn't know when I first started watching it. And when I learned who it was, I was genuinely surprised. I'm like, oh, yeah. You guys got a name for this.
Yeah.
And I love the price that he did it for.
Yeah. I mean, just one of those interesting things where, I don't think John Larroquette's career happened because of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but it is pretty interesting that just the guy who did the voiceover actually ended up kind of going on to become a big deal. That's just
Do you know what he got paid for doing it?
Oh no,
he got paid a 6-pack and a gram of weed.
That's great. I was just reading an interview with it was the lead singer for the Mamas and the Papas. And she was talking about one of the weirdest experiences she had was going to go see Star Wars. And then Harrison Ford shows up on screen and she goes, "Oh my God, that's my pot dealer." Right? How great is that?
Oh my God.
She's like, "I didn't even know he was an actor."
Well, because he was mostly a carpenter at the time, too.
No, 100%. Yeah, no, he was
going to skip the audition because he thought I'm wasting my time. I could make more money just building a dresser for somebody right now.
Yeah, 100%.
Just a commissioned dresser. I can make more money than I could on Star Wars. And thank fucking God he fought that urge to skip the audition.
Exactly.
This is the one thing that I do love about filmmaking and films in general is just the serendipity of a lot of this. And there's so many big names in this business that at some point we're nobody or close to nobody.
And then someday, and then suddenly we're an overnight success.
Yeah. Crazy. Wish it would happen to me. But
now, all right. So let's see here. Couple of things I want to mention. There's something about this movie that to me is like pure Texas, like from the sweat, from the way that even in the opening voiceover, the voiceover in the radio announcements, they're immediately well, this couldn't have been anybody from Texas. Clearly this was outside elements. And you're like, no, this is, the call is coming from inside the house. Texas is here is the problem.
Yeah. Texas is just middle Florida.
Yeah. I mean, you're not wrong. Sorry, Texas, except not sorry. Now also I would say, the thing that this movie does, and tell me if you think that I'm wrong, the thing that I think that Texas Chainsaw Massacre achieves more than in almost any other horror films, it's the vibes of this movie. It's the texture. It's the energy. There's so much of this movie that's kind of weird, especially at the beginning, that slowly starts to kind of come together. Not to get too crazy, I kind of think of Fellini in the way that he would make movies where you would have 2 or 3 disparate storylines that all kind of merge together by the very, very end, like 3 strands of rope that you don't quite understand how they're going to come together. And at the very, very end, they kind of very quickly spiral together. And that's what you get with this, because there's so many tropes and cliches and things that have become what just happens in horror movies now that you don't expect them to come back together. Like when they stop at the barbecue place, normally that's just a scene about oh, don't you go around the old Jenkins place. Oh yeah, the teenagers went up there. They didn't come back, you see. Normally that character doesn't come back in Act 3. But in this one, everything that's kind of set up and just kind of puts you on your back foot. Everything that happens with the hitchhiker, everything that happens at the barbecue shop ends up becoming part of the story later on. Much like a good butcher, Texas Chainsaw Massacre leaves no piece of the carcass unused. Every single thing that comes up in this movie gets used in this movie.
Well, even the hitchhiker makes use of that trope in the sense of when he talks about brain cheese.
Oh, he's got the line
which was what was supposed to be called, right? Wasn't Texas Chainsaw? It was supposed to be either called Leatherface or Brain Cheese.
Head Cheese was the first title. Sorry,
not Brain Cheese.
Head cheese, and then Leatherface, and then finally they came to Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But there is a line in this movie that I think best describes Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is, "You probably would like it if you didn't know what was in it." And that I think is a great description, because Texas Chainsaw Massacre is an all-time banger. A lot of times when you try to explain it to people, they're like, "I don't know if I'd like that." And you're like, I'm telling you, this movie rules. Mm-hmm. Now, and you're going to think it's going to be this kind of experience by its reputation. But in fact, the way that it's balanced out and the flavors that it gives you as a result are actually something much more enjoyable than what it appears kind of just on paper.
Yeah. And there's something to be said about this movie being a real slice of the 70s. that that I think someone going into watching this for the first time, not really understanding the essence of Texas Chainsaw and movies like that. Like the idea when they go to pick up the hitchhiker, like, oh, why would they do something like picking up the hitchhiker? I'm like, dude, like
70s.
it was the 70s, man. Free love, everything like that. Like people were just living dangerously. And like people felt safer around that time. And this was around like this was after like this is around the time of Watergate, the Vietnam War, Charles Manson had just happened. And so like everyone's guard was down when all of this crazy fucked up shit in history took place. And I know for a fact that Toby Hooper, who was originally somebody who did documentaries, he wanted to portray that sense of false security all of a sudden being forced into reality. The idea, like, and a lot of this movie plays, it shoots like a documentary.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
It's very voyeuristic. It's very like everything just from looking at the piece of roadkill on the side of the road. Which, by the way, there's just such a fun story behind the armadillo that even Texas Chainsaw 3 kind of played homage to, where there's a dead armadillo on the road that two of the characters had to kill because they accidentally ran it over. But apparently, I think it was Kim Henkel, one of the co-writers, or at least one of the producers. He was tasked with finding roadkill. And originally, it was supposed to be a dead dog, but he found a dead armadillo, and he learned taxidermy.
Yeah, so you're talking about Robert Burns, the production.
Robert Burns, that's who I'm thinking of. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, like there are two names that we have to mention because if we don't mention them, shame on us. And that is Robert Burns, the production designer, and Daniel Pearl, the cinematographer. I would argue that no shade thrown at Toby Hooper. I think that without Pearl and Burns, Texas Chainsaw Massacre is like a footnote of a movie. The creepiness of all of the furniture, the learning the taxidermy to just get that one shot with with the armadillo, the outfit that Leatherface wears, the documentary style, the number of times that I can tell Daniel Pearl was hurled into a position, like into a situation where they were just like, you have to shoot it. And he's like, okay, well, I don't have like half the things that I need to do this. And they were like, well, you got about 10 minutes, buddy. So we'll be back. Figure it out. And like every day, both of those dudes showed up, did the work, and created a visual style.
Yeah.
And creepiness. Like I said, the vibes, this movie is one of the only movies that I think is very easy to explain. It's got a smell. Like, there's just a certain thing about it that you're like, you understand it's not coming out of the Blu-ray, but like it's there.
No, and they do a great job of capturing the suffering of the cast and crew.
Oh yeah,
of this film, because like every day they shot was like over 100 degrees, and like the actor playing Leatherface, Gunnar Hansen. He was only allowed one costume.
Yeah,
and the whole time they didn't wash it. They didn't wash it at all, like, because they only had the one and they couldn't afford another one. And this isn't that if they washed it,
this isn't a didn't want to. This is a couldn't wash it. And then by the second week, everyone was like, well, I'm not sitting next to that guy. He smells like a foot that we left outside in 100-degree heat in Texas. Because that's pretty much what happened.
Yeah, so much to the point where the lead actress, Marilyn Burns, playing Sally, who's the one who survives, by the end of that shoot, she talks about how she'd been consistently covered in so much fake blood that it had just crystallized on her skin and clothes. And when she was on the back of the truck laughing hysterically, she did not have to fake a bit of that, because that was the last day of shooting. And she was genuinely so ecstatic that she would never have to return to that shoot ever again. And then later it broke her heart when they called her back for reshoots. And she felt genuine dread when they had to bring her back, because there's a point in this film where they talked about how there was a bit of the blood effect that wasn't working, and the only real blood that you actually see is when they they literally cut her finger with a razor. And this wasn't, she allowed this to happen. For the longest time, I thought that this is something that the director just did on a whim without consent, which would have been really, really, really fucked up. But she was so desperate just to finish.
Yeah.
That she's like, just
cut me.
Yeah, just cut me, Mac. I can't see. Just cut me.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like Rocky.
But yeah, the actor playing the old man, that's real blood he's sucking right there.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, like, feel free, somebody correct me if I'm wrong about that, but I do think I remember hearing that he was really, he really had to. Once again, it's the 70s. We allowed for so much more uncalled for behavior that would get a shoot shut down in seconds.
And that said, it's also for a movie in the 70s, like it's very interestingly, like just including the character of Franklin being stuck in a wheelchair and them committing to that is like is a very progressive idea of having someone who is disabled like that. And he's just presented as just another character. It's not like he's not presented as the character who gets everybody into trouble or anything. I mean, he's not even the first to die. He's not even close.
No, and
Franklin doesn't
really
go out to like the
15-minute
mark.
Like he's actually, I mean, like in the film, he's sort of portrayed as a bit whiny, but they don't portray him as mentally handicapped. He's just,
no. I mean, he's more. I think it's like his complaints are more like, "Hey, don't go upstairs and have a good time, and everybody laughing upstairs without me." When I can barely get, when I can barely get out of the car and I can barely push myself around, like this isn't fun for me. But like that's a very, I would assume like I'm just someone who's not in a wheelchair. Like I've got to assume that is a real, like that would be a realistic and a real thing that would be troubling if you were in a wheelchair. Is just those times when you can't just go exploring, you can't just be part of the group. You always kind of have to be, an outsider.
Always the third wheel. And that kind of makes me want to let's touch on just Leatherface. I like the fact that Leatherface, while yes, he is this horrible serial killer, in every film, I would say he is portrayed as almost kind of sympathetic. You are supposed to be more sympathetic towards him, to feel kind of sorry for him, because like the original actor had in his head, like, no, this is somebody who is an invalid. Like he's mentally handicapped.
Yeah, he's just a big
he was
child.
brought up in poverty and constantly abused. And so to prepare for the role, he went to a hospital and watched kids who were mentally disabled. And there was a doctor who like made an observation, like that is actually one of the most accurate reenactments of like how kids with that kind of disability might move or might tend to behave.
He's a lot closer to something like Lenny from in Mice and Men, where you're like, yes. No, the problem he's like a kid who can just bench press a car. And that's not such a good combination when they don't know how strong they are. And there's the scene where he when he's all freaked out because the kids keep showing up and he doesn't know where they're coming from, and he kind of like goes over the window and kind of freaks out and cries.
Yeah,
but at the same time,
he's genuinely scared.
Yeah, and he doesn't overpower but then later on, like it's clear that like with his uncle, right, would be the
that sometimes very hard to determine who's related to who.
But when his uncle's screaming at him, oh, look what you did, you broke the door, you damn, and like he's not, despite the fact that like Leatherface could crush that dude with his thumbs, he doesn't, because it's clearly like there's a power structure and he's grown up with this and he's become normalized to this, so that's what he's going to put up with. But yeah, there's a fascinating sympathy that you get with Leatherface that you don't get with Michael Myers, that you don't get with Freddy Krueger, that with most of these characters, like most of these big horror icons, you get like a tickling, a smattering, just a little bit of sympathy. But like, I mean, don't get me wrong, no one here is saying that Leatherface is without fault, but what I am saying is like like he's a much more you feel much. I feel bad for Leatherface. I don't feel bad for Freddy Krueger, if that makes sense.
No,
Like,
exactly.
yeah, well, you should have gotten burned to death.
And I would say, to each sequel's credit, they each do a very good job at portraying that kind of sympathy story. Even in Next Generation, when you first see Leatherface, he comes up behind the teenager who's like the dumb blonde character, and he's just kind of watching her and just playing with her hair. He's like, what is this? What is this person? Like, this person smells good. Like, her hair is really soft. It has a George and the Rabbits kind of vibe to it. And then when she freaks out and screams, he's fucking scared. He's like, what's happening? I need to make this thing quiet now. And in the 2013 3D movie that they did, they really played up the sympathy for him, in that eventually, like, his whole family was killed off, and the only person that was left was like this grandmother, who kind of just was the most higher functioning person in that family, had money, and was able to keep him hidden, but took care of him, treated him like a person, as much of a person as she knew how to, and was transferring the care of Leatherface over to the main character, who didn't know any of this going into it. And eventually, like, the story closes with, well, we're family. Like, this is my cousin. Like, I have to take care of him. He doesn't know any better. In a very, like, obviously not as well as, I think, for example, Terry Gilliam would have been a great person to pick to film either a remake or a sequel to Texas Chainsaw, because I feel like that Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas look, I think, would translate really well to this franchise.
That'd be very interesting.
But I think, like, he would do really well at playing into that level of this misunderstood character, who is in most ways very abusive and violent, but observing it from the psyche of that person. And so, and then it explores the idea too of Leatherface. When he wears a face, he is that person. And that also dives into a little bit of cross-dressing and trans tropes that might not necessarily be portrayed in a healthy, non-offensive way to the community, but it was one of the first films to sort of tackle that concept.
I mean, I would say that, and listeners, tell us if we're wrong, but like, I would argue that the like, some of the aspects in this are probably more sympathetic than you'd see like in Silence of the Lambs. Like, this is much more lightly kind of touched on, and just kind of part of the vibes, for lack of a better term. Where like Silence of the Lambs is much more like, look at this dirty you know what I mean? Like, there's a much more demonization happening in Silence of the Lambs, where this feels much more of like a side thing. I would say, by the way, since we were speaking of Terry Gilliam and that kind of like wide angle cinematography, I actually would love to have seen Louis Isaacs, the cinematographer from The Dentist, be able to take on Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because he's got that kind of wide angle look already. I would think those two people together would like him and Toby, I think, would create some really interesting images. But
also Next Generation, I would argue his family, Leatherface's family, is the most trans-friendly family I have ever seen in a horror movie.
Okay.
Because they're literally just like, my brother needs a new face. He is tired of this identity, and now he wants this woman's face. So we are going to allow him. Literally just this like, they beat the crap out of him, but like, it's one of those things where you're just like, nah, they're perfectly fine with him doing his thing. And I'm like, that's like, I was watching, like, this movie is strangely progressive, but also very offensive.
Yes. I think that's the duality there. Now, I actually haven't seen that one. I've seen pretty much everything in Texas Chainsaw. I did not realize Texas Chainsaw 3 Leatherface existed. I, for some reason, had just slotted in Next Generation into my brain as the OG 3, but that's OG 4. And then there's there's 4 or 5 of the remakes. I think
Ken, are you okay with us diving into some of these sequels now?
I mean, I go nuts, man. Like you did, David, you did more of the work here when it comes to the the Texas Chainsaw Massacre cinematic universe. So take the audiences away and tell them about what to check out with the Outliers.
Okay, so to understand this first, like you kind of have to dive into the politics of distribution and production. And when this was first made, and Ken, I know you know about this, where this was done by the same distributors who distributed the very controversial film Deep Throat.
Yeah.
And the people who were distributing Deep Throat were part of the mob. And so what they were doing was they were funneling the profits for Texas Chainsaw to launder for the profits that they were making, that they were pocketing for Deep Throat. And eventually, like they had signed a contract. I can't remember the names of the people involved with this, but the producer, but the directors and the production of the film, they signed a contract with them where they would get, I want to say like 80% of the profits pretty much. But because they had pocketed so much of this money, I think the cinematographer took home like a paycheck of just a little over $41.
Oh, wow.
And so nobody saw any money originally, even though this movie was making buku bucks. And so eventually they sued and they won in court. And so distribution then, like they said, like, not only do you have to pay all these members of production at least $200,000 a piece. Hello, Lily, my dog's here. But also you have to release the rights to the film. And so that was when New Line Cinema came along and they bought the rights. And I believe then that was when Toby Hooper went and did 2. And sorry, she wants to bump into the mic here. Lily, go away. I love you. You're sweet. And so he did 2, and then that happened. And it did not get nearly as well received as the other one. And so finally, then they started doing different variations of the script. And this is when Texas Chainsaw 3 came along with Viggo Mortensen. And that one had been in like pre-production hell for the longest time. And if I'm not mistaken, I think who was because I think it was Kim Henkel. No, Kim Henkel directed Next Generation. But Kim Henkel, they had somebody else directing Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw 3. He was at one point fired, and they were originally going to get either Peter Jackson or they were going to get Savini.
Wow. Okay.
To direct the film, but both of them didn't want to do it. So they picked this one director, who was apparently a bit difficult with production, and so they fired him. But they couldn't find anyone else, and so they rehired him. And in this film, there is a character. There's a character played by which actor did I say was it that played him?
Wait, which actor? I mean, Kim? No, Kim Henkel's the director.
Yeah, Kim Henkel. Sorry, for some reason it decided not to load the Texas Chainsaw thing on there. Texas Chainsaw. Do my.
Which Texas Chainsaw are we talking about? There's like
Leatherface 3. I know, like they all have very similar titles.
Like, and let's be clear to the people at home. Like, there is a Texas Chainsaw Massacre. There is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. There is Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. But there's also Texas Leatherface. Chainsaw. There's also a Texas Chainsaw 3D. There's also a Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Beginning. There's also Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation. Like, it's keeping these titles straight.
Ken Foray, who played the character of Benny. At one point in the film, he is definitely killed slowly by a chainsaw in the head while he's fighting Leatherface. Like Leatherface forces his head up against the chainsaw sitting in the water. He is definitely dead. But apparently his character tested well with test audiences. Oh, dude was born in Indianapolis. Goddamn. Oh, fucking A. Is a fellow Hoosier. Maybe I learned that at some other point. Yes, I did. Yeah, I did learn that he was from Indianapolis. I think that was in a previous podcast. I just forgotten that. But he tested well, so the producers decided to bring him back, and they filmed an alternate ending without the original director. Wow. And so in doing this, like they not only filmed it without the original director, where he literally just shows up, saves the main character, and they ride off into the sunset. They didn't tell the director that they had done this, and he did not find out until literally he saw the movie for the first time in theaters.
Yikes.
It is
That's gotta be wild.
Jeff Burr. Jeff Burr is the guy who directed this one. And so, yeah, this one wasn't well received, obviously. And this was apparently, they went to the ratings board over 11 times trying to get an R rating, and it kept coming back X because it was so horribly gory. Like the amount that you see in this movie, it seems kind of meh the way you see it, but apparently there was so much fucked up shit in this movie that did not make it, because each time it came back from the ratings board as rated X, and they needed distribution. So then they moved on to The Next Generation, which Kim Henkel, the co-writer of the first one, came back to direct. And he also wrote this one. And this one was supposed to be more of a retcon for the franchise. And he's like, this is the true sequel to Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And this was just this is one of those so bad it's good kind of movies. If you guys can check out my stories before tomorrow, I'll maybe make a post as well on our little page so you can see some of it. Some of the acting just comes out of nowhere, makes no sense, horribly delivered, horribly written. I am surprised, but this is by one of the co-writers of the original one.
Like, well, that is one of the surprising things, is like there is a naturalism that Toby is able to get out of the actors in the first movie that most of the other actors don't. Like, yeah. I would argue that one of the problems with the Marcus Nispel Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the Platinum Dunes remake, is everyone looks like an Abercrombie and Fitch model. Like, I don't believe there's any naturalism to that group. Everyone is just too gorgeous. Everyone is too much a type. Now, that said, I will also say there is a really, really nice moment in the Nispel version that is not in the original. And I love that when the first, like the character who's essentially Kirk in the remake, when Leatherface, the wedding ring.
Yes.
Yes. When like Leatherface finds that, it's a nice little moment of kind of like it gives Kirk's character a lot more nuance and background by just that little reveal, because up until that point, he's been kind of like a little bit of a party boy. Maybe you're not really sure if he's serious. And then that little moment just, makes his character seem just a lot more real.
Yeah, and this was also co-written by the remake. Kim Henkel pretty much helped co-write all the Texas Chainsaw films, all the way up until the 2017 one.
Yeah, yeah. Kim has been in the background of the franchise, pushing it up the hill almost more than anybody else.
Yeah, like I think he definitely gets credit, and I like the Jessica Biel remake.
Yeah, me too.
I think it's well shot. I
beautifully shot by also Daniel Pearl, who shot the original. Like, actually, for any of our viewers who are interested in film school, like Daniel Pearl shooting the original and the remake are an excellent side-by-side evaluation of like what you can do with a budget and what you can do when you're doing a big, stylish, high-end production versus the original, which was much more of a cinema verite, documentary style. It's a much smaller movie. And so, for nothing else, I think anyone interested in cinematography should watch just at least Texas Chainsaw Massacre and the remake, just to see that, what happens when a cinematographer approaches the same project, but 25 years apart in his career.
Yeah, and what a performance from Lee Ernie as well, who played Sheriff Hoyt. He was one of my favorite things about the film.
Oh yeah,
he's just, anytime I was more scared of him than I was of Leatherface.
Oh, for sure.
But he had some great comical lines, like his scene with Mike Vogel, who plays Andy, the one who has put the gun in his mouth. It's a brilliant scene.
Mm-hmm.
Like a brilliant performance from both of those actors, and there's just so much tension going on in that scene alone. Like, a lot of people really shit on the remake, and I don't understand why, because I think it's a well done sequel that it's not like if you wanted to see the same thing, go watch the original. But this is just another interpretation of it while bringing in people from the original to give you a little something different.
And it also, I would say, like makes like the remake, I would say makes a character out of the chainsaw kind of in a way that is not really there in the original. I mean, obviously the original, the chainsaw is part of it, but like in the remake, kind of as soon as that chainsaw starts, it kind of never stops again. It becomes the shark in Jaws. It becomes just this constant this constant intruding element that just permeates the soundtrack and is either ramping up or down depending on where the terror is at.
Yeah. And then the last sequel that I saw, which was today, which was the 3D one. And that one I ended up enjoying a lot more than I expected to. That is one of those films that I liked the fact that they played more into being sympathetic towards Leatherface, that really Leatherface is also his own victim. It just kind of falls apart towards the end. And I think that's just the one unfortunate part of that production. But the interesting thing is too, like the very beginning, while it is not necessarily, it doesn't look cleanly shot, the production set of the beginning of it, they literally took the house from the original Texas Chainsaw, because I think at that point it had been built into like a bed and breakfast.
Yeah.
So they couldn't shoot there anymore. So they recreated the whole fucking house. And when I say recreated, everything to a T. If there was a blood stain on the wall in the film itself, they recreated the blood stain down to the spot of blood down to like a tiny blood spot on the wall. They like the saw door. They made sure that the saw marks were exactly what they were in the original film. They brought back a whole bunch of the original actors to play some of the remaining Sawyer family members. The idea was that there were more than just those members of the family, and they were all held up in there, and an angry mob came and burned the whole house down. But it's really impressive just how well they recreated that whole set, only to burn it down within like 5 to 7 minutes of the film starting. And I do remember production saying it broke our heart that was in the script, that it had to burn down, but it was necessary to the plot.
It's like finding out about the production of Independence Day, and that like it was like one guy spent like 8 months perfectly recreating the White House to blow up in like 2/4 of a second. And it's just like, all right, and boom. Well, that's all the work I did for the year.
Yeah.
Over that quick. Looks great in slow-mo, but in the moment, just over in a flash.
Yeah, just kind of like when we were talking about with American Werewolf in London, doing all of that work, literally just to shoot it for like 5 to 10 minutes, and then it's done.
Yeah. Does it do anything else? Nope. Well, then we're done.
Technically, the image is still immortalized in film forever. But yeah, no, so like those are the sequels, and it like I highly recommend that anybody who doesn't know sort of the ins and outs of how those sequels got made to definitely check them out, because it is fascinating. There's so many little like bits of meat and protein that come with if you think like, oh, this is a terrible movie, like chances are the making of it is more fascinating.
Oh, for sure. David, we're coming up. We're just about to hit an hour here.
Oh, damn.
Is there anything else pressing? Any names, any bits, anything? The one thing I would mention, just for our listeners who might be familiar with my work, with some of our work, or at least my work, I stole from this movie endlessly for Clowntown. You can find multiple shots in Clowntown that I straight ripped just out of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So like that's I love this movie so much. I have used it in my own work extensively.
I've got to watch Clowntown again. It's been a couple of years now since I've seen it. And I know I saw Toy Box about like a year and a half ago. And goddamn, those are two good-looking films.
Yeah, we'll see. Hey Shudder, if you're looking for a good-looking clown movie, maybe consider Clowntown.
Yeah. Also, yeah, guys, if you're making a film and you want your film to look nice, hire this man.
Hi.
Because
What I
he's
do.
good at he's if you want somebody who's good at his job and will do it for
A good price. Yeah.
yeah for a
I
good
make the
price
pictures
and
look pretty.
yeah, pay him well, but he'll show you how to save money.
Indeed.
Yep.
Well,
yeah,
then,
so
yeah,
Ken, we're doing a little something different this season
it's true.
for how we're picking our movies.
Oh, for season 2, yeah, no, we're throwing everything up in the air. We're doing something completely new. We are leaving what movie we're going to do up to you. Much like last week, we are going to throw two movies.
Up to me, Ken? Up to me?
Oh, no. I'm talking to the viewers out there.
Oh.
They are going to get a chance to go to our Instagram page, use our stories, right? Because that's how we're doing the poll, because I'm old and I don't know how polls work on Instagram. And we're going to let you, the audience, choose what we, the watchers, are going to review next. Now, David, I have picked out a movie that I'm going to put up for you to review. Do you have a movie as well?
I do. Let me turn back to my Amazon Prime screen. Oh, excuse me. Because I put them on, I put a list of them on must watch. I'm just like, which one am I going to pick?
Now, personally, I am going to go for another all-time classic because I think we should get some of the classics out of the way, and that's something that I think we can do in season 2 a little bit more. But also one I'm not sure if you've actually seen. So, David, what movie, or have you figured out which movie you have?
I do. This one looks really fascinating. This is one that I have not seen, but it looks creepy as fuck.
All right, great. I am choosing Night of the Living Dead, the original, 1968, George Romero.
Oh,
what are you choosing?
Oh, damn. Mine's not nearly as old as that one. Mine is actually a Shudder original, Ken. Mine is was made in 2020 and is called Caveat, or Caveat, if I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. So yeah, Caveat, a lone drifter suffering from partial memory loss, accepts a job to look after a psychologically troubled woman in an abandoned house on an isolated island. I watched the trailer and it looked creepy as fuck. And so, you know what? I decided to risk it and see how it looks. But yeah, let's well, it doesn't. We don't even have to go back in time. We kind of we have to retire the time machine for a while.
We don't need to retire the time machine. I think we just need to. The time machine probably just needs a little time off, maybe a little tune up. Just an opportunity for it to. We're going to take it to the shop. We're going to get the fluids changed out. We're going to get things overhauled. Maybe new rims on it. And then we'll see. But other than that, then David, what you got some pluggables you want to plug?
Yes, guys, you can find our poll over at Shudder_show on Instagram. So keep an eye on that. I'm going to be putting that up on the story, and once it's expired, then I will let you know which one won out, and then you can find out everything that we've got going on and stay updated. You can also find me at _DW Marlowe on Instagram, where I get up to my regular musings in my regular everyday boring life. Ken, what about you? What you got?
Let's see here. You can find me on Twitter at Ken Stacknick and on Instagram, same KenStacknik. You can find my dog at Freddy Potatoes. That's a Freddy with an IE on both Instagram and Twitter as well. You can find us, the podcast, on Twitter at Shudder Show. You can email us, shuttershow@gmail.com. And other than that, that's all we got for this week. Ladies and gentlemen, have a good night. Good luck. And most importantly,
go fuck yourselves.
Good night, everybody. We love you.